Hi, and welcome to this live reading of Mountains Wanted from the Mountain series, Book 1 by Phoebe Alexander, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Don't ask, don't tell. Make it a 6-inch, please, directed the young man standing at the counter. Sarah stifled a giggle. 36 years old, and I still have such a dirty mind. Her gaze swept up and down the man's body. He was dressed in camouflage, and though his ass was mostly covered by his uniform, his thick, sturdy legs promised it would be equally spectacular. She bit her bottom lip as she turned to study the young woman behind her. She had soft, doe-brown eyes and auburn curls, and on her feet were kitten heels in a deep crimson shade. She seemed too young to be a fellow faculty member, too well dressed to be a student. I love your shoes, Sarah gushed, eliciting an embarrassed smile from the woman, who quickly averted her eyes. The man in front of her spun around to have a look, and Sarah caught a glimpse of the name tag on his uniform. McAllister. He grinned at her before turning to tell the sub shop employee what he wanted on his 6-inch on wheat. Wow, he's gorgeous. The woman is gorgeous too, but she doesn't seem to be into women. Pity. Too much time had passed since Sarah had indulged herself with either sex, and both men and women seemed to be catching her eye more and more often these days. I've been working too hard. She placed her sandwich order and watched the soldier push his way out the glass door. A 7-inch would be perfect for me. She stifled another laugh at the thought. Sarah stepped out into the hot September sun with her lunch. She trekked across the quad toward her office in the Arts and Sociology building, reviewing the remaining items on her to-do list before her afternoon lecture. No matter how hard she tried to focus on work, thoughts about ending her dry spell crept in. The phone buzzing in her pocket jolted her back to the present. It was her son Owen's school calling. He was sitting in the nurse's office with a fever. Shit, how am I going to accomplish both eating and running to get him before my 2 p.m. class? Only slightly daunted, she rerouted to the parking lot where her car blasted its pent-up heat into her face as if there were a burning inferno inside. Sarah turned the key in the ignition, cranked up the AC, and crammed a bite of sandwich down her throat before backing out of the parking space. It was all part of being a single mom. Owen had perked up quite a bit by dinner time. Sarah presented her 2 children with a colorful stir-fry with just the right amount of spice. Owen gulped his portion down while Abby picked at hers. Sarah shook her head at this phase her teenage daughter was going through. Too much eyeliner, wearing skinny jeans and baggy t-shirts with scraggly uncombed hair, begging for a nose piercing, and not eating dinner, only to gorge on potato chips at midnight. Sarah snapped out of her reflections on Abby to hear Owen ask, "What's an erection?" Abby looked mortified. Ugh, ew, Mom, there he goes again with the gross questions. Make him stop. Oh, Abigail, it's a perfectly reasonable question. Sarah was used to her younger child's inquisitive nature, which she heartily encouraged. By this point, she was completely unfazed by his questions and actually prided herself on the matter-of-fact scientific answers she provided him. Well, an erection happens when blood flow is increased to the penis and it grows bigger and harder. Abby promptly left the table, shaking her head. Owen looked satisfied. It was always difficult to tell if Owen was actually curious or just wanted to annoy his older sister. Sarah figured it was probably a combination of the two. Abby, put your food in the fridge in case you get hungry later, Sarah called after her as she started up the stairs in a huff. I don't want you eating junk food late again. Sarah heard her cell phone ringing on the kitchen counter. Rachel. Hey, lady. How was class today? Is Owen all right? Came her best friend's concerned voice. News sure travels fast. Sarah assumed Rachel's son Thomas, who was also in 5th grade, had told his mother Owen went home sick. Yes, Yes, he's fine. It's probably another one of those 24-hour viruses that's going around. He just scarfed down dinner as if nothing is wrong. I don't have a class till 12 tomorrow, so I'll just see if my mom can watch him in the afternoon. What's new with you? I want to do something this weekend. I'm insanely bored. And I need to get laid. Sarah laughed. There was only one woman on the planet as blunt and open about her sexuality as she was, and that was her best friend, Rachel Brock. They were kindred spirits, destined to meet and become lifelong friends. They had been together since their Lamaze class, gave birth to boys within days of each other, and when Sarah moved to Maryland, Rachel followed. It was almost like having a spouse, except they didn't live together. Girl, you always need to get laid, Sarah giggled. I heard there's a new club in D.C. I've kind of been wanting to check it out. Or you could come with me to this house party I was invited to at the beach, Rachel suggested. The beach. Ugh, that's a 3-hour drive. I don't know, Rachel. That's pretty far. I have a lot of work to catch up on this weekend. My senior seminar has their annotated bibliographies due on Friday. Work schmirk, Rachel retorted. I swear, Sarah, your girly bits are going to shrivel up and fall off if we don't get you some cock soon. Speaking of which, any cute students in your classes this semester? Actually, Rachel might be more blunt and open than I am, Sarah recalculated. How many times do I have to tell you that my students are off limits? She heard Rachel start to protest. When is this party? It's on Saturday night. I have a big lecture on Friday evening. Let's see how I feel after that, okay? Sarah conceded. Why are you giving a lecture on a Friday night? Oh, it's really more of a panel discussion than a lecture. It's part of the university's fall colloquium series, Current Issues in American Politics. This one is on the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. I'm going to talk about sexuality in the military. That sounds hot, Rachel laughed. Sex and military men? Two of my faves. Why am I not surprised you think it's hot? Sarah said sarcastically. The memory of McAllister from the sub shop immediately flashed in her mind. Okay, listen. I'm going to clean up from dinner. Text me later, okay? Will do, sugar lips, Rachel replied. A house party, Sarah thought as she began to clear the dishes from the table. It's been a long damn time. On Friday, Sarah was relieved when she finally arrived home after her long day. Her cozy bungalow with the warm golden and amber walls and the beautiful wood floors felt like an embrace when she crossed the threshold. She loved having a sanctuary away from the craziness of the Beltway traffic and the noise of campus. She wanted to raise her children in a nurturing atmosphere, so she had done everything possible to make her home feel like a nest for her 2 baby birds, even though they were hardly babies anymore. She had also done research about how a child's environment impacts their behavior and ability to learn. She was the crazy mom who stood at the paint counter at Lowe's debating whether cinnamon apple or nutmeg spice would be the homier color for the kitchen walls. She hurried to change her clothes, hating that she had to leave again as soon as she got dinner on the table for Owen and Abigail. Otherwise, she'd be late for her Don't Ask, Don't Tell panel event. She didn't imagine it would be very well attended. I mean, seriously, how many students are going to voluntarily attend on a Friday night, she pondered. An hour later, she shuffled down the sidewalk toward the auditorium. The sun was sinking in the west, and the trees silhouetted against the glowing clouds created a little stinging tear in the corner of her eye. Sarah was generally optimistic, but every once in a while, just a bit of melancholy crept in, no matter how hard she fought it. Beauty often stirred those passions inside her, leaving her wishing she had someone to share it with. She shrugged away the tear, trying to clear her head to focus on her lecture notes. Several uniformed military types were milling around outside the hall where the lecture would take place, relatively remarkable due to the proximity of the university to several military bases as well as the topic of the lecture. Sarah had more than a passing curiosity about military life, and particularly the sociological aspects of it. She'd never really been close to anyone who served, but she had studied deployment-related post-traumatic stress disorder, and as part of her research into homosexuality and bisexuality, she had examined the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. That was the focus of the panel tonight. Sarah hoped for a lively but civil debate. It always surprised her how heated discussions about human sexuality could become. Why did people care so much about what others did behind closed doors? She fired up her laptop and watched the audience file in. Most of the military-type people sat near the front of the auditorium. One young man caught her eye and chose a seat within spitting distance. He was nearly 6 feet tall, sported sandy brown buzzed hair, broad shoulders, and piercing blue eyes. Well, if he isn't the quintessential all-American clean-cut Army guy, Sarah mused. I think I will call him G.I. Joe. Suddenly his eyes met hers, and she was busted for staring at him. Recognition dawned immediately. He was McAllister from the sub shop. He smirked a little in return and then quickly glanced down at his program where Sarah's picture and a brief bio fell on page 2. The panel moderator adjusted the microphone, initiating a bit of feedback, which signaled the audience to quiet down, then proceeded with the introductions. Each panelist presented the findings of their research on the topic, taking 15 minutes or so apiece, and then the moderator opened up the floor for questions from the audience. There was quite a bit of passion and fire in the voices of those who asked questions, but civility was maintained. Sarah was relieved. She was particularly proud of her response to one older retired veteran who was adamant he wouldn't want to serve alongside a gay man in combat. With all due respect, Sarah remarked, let's say your life is on the line in the heat of battle. Would you rather have a gay soldier who is 100% focused and loyal to his fellow soldiers by your side, or a straight soldier whose mind is nowhere near the battlefield? The truth of the matter is people have the ability to be professional and put their recreational and sexual desires aside when needed. This ability has absolutely nothing to do with sexual orientation. It has everything to do with integrity and work ethic. There was applause when she finished. The discussion wrapped up around 9 p.m., and Sarah began to gather up her belongings. Some of the panelists were sticking around to further debate with audience members, but she wanted to get home to her children. She walked down the stairs and began heading up the aisle when G.I. Joe, McAllister, stepped into her path. Dr. Lind, he said formally, apparently not recognizing her from earlier in the week at the sub shop. I appreciated your response to the vet earlier, but I wondered if you have any personal experience serving in the military. I have found, when hunkered down in close quarters with my fellow soldiers, that I don't want to be distracted by thinking one of them is checking me out. He seemed as if he was prodding her for a specific response, testing her. As the corners of his lips turned up into a fuller version of the smirk he'd given her earlier, she realized how incredibly good-looking he was. He was definitely older than her traditional-age students, but still young, perhaps late 20s. He projected an air of confidence, a presence. No, I haven't had the honor of serving. She honestly couldn't recall what else he'd said. She was so distracted by his full lips and straight white teeth, not to mention the mischievous gleam in his icy blue eyes. She forcefully gained her composure. Please, call me Sarah. She extended her hand. He firmly shook it. I'm James McAllister. Nice to meet you. I'm an instructor in the ROTC program, and I required my students to attend tonight. I was interested in the research you did on homophobia among military personnel. I have heard a lot of that bullshit throughout my years in the service. He suddenly looked a little embarrassed. I'm sorry. Please excuse my language, he added sheepishly. She wondered if he meant her research was bullshit or the homophobia itself was. No need to censor yourself around me, Sarah offered. I'd love to talk to you about your experience sometime, not to mention hear your own thoughts about the don't ask, don't tell policy. It's a hot topic these days, and the media is having a field day with it. She gave him another once-over, which set her wheels turning. Maybe over coffee or something? James flashed his all-American grin even more broadly than before. That would certainly be interesting. Interesting good or interesting bad? Sarah's eyebrows rose as she leaned toward him expectantly, a posture that showed interest and openness. Her fascination with nonverbal communication would often cause her to stop mid-thought to analyze the position, angles, and gestures her body was exhibiting. She couldn't help but notice how close together they were standing. I believe things are good if they're interesting, James explained with a wink. I like the way you think. Sarah smiled and fished through her bag for a business card. She scrawled her cell phone number on the back and handed it to James. this time steadying his hands as he tucked the card into the pocket of his uniform, his eyes never leaving hers. At that moment, a flash of lightning struck her mind, a brilliant image of those broad tan fingers gliding over her, gripping her.